Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're pulling out an incredible economic detective tool to reveal the hidden mechanics behind global market shortages, volatile price tags, and the frankly fascinating reality of how things actually get made. I mean, if you've ever stopped in the grocery aisle and wondered why the cost of your favorite food suddenly skyrocketed, or why a trendy, sold-out shirt gets restocked in a matter of days, while a sold-out crop takes months, well, you are in the exact right place. Buckle up, because we're going to decode the secret language of supply.
Okay, let's just dive right in. Picture this. We're in Tanzania, and farmers are hard at work sorting the annual harvest. Tanzania is actually the world's biggest producer of cashew nuts. And for these farmers, their entire livelihood literally relies on this single crop. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. The success of this crop is dictated almost entirely by unpredictable weather patterns and planting choices that have to be made months in advance. And that brings us to a literal multi-million-dollar mystery. Why on earth are cashew nut prices so incredibly volatile? You know, the global demand for cashews, especially coming from Asian countries, is consistently massive. Yet, this is a market that forces the Tanzanian government to step in with huge bailouts to buy unsold crops one year, only for the farmers to rake in massive profits the very next year. How can a market with such huge, reliable demand be so dangerously unstable for the people actually supplying it?
Well, the answer boils down to a concept called price elasticity of supply, or just PES for short. This is our main detective tool for today. PES is simply a measure of how much the quantity supplied of a product changes when its price changes. Assuming all other factors stay exactly the same, it basically tells us how responsive producers are to shifts in the market price. Are they quick and agile on their feet, or kind of slow and rigid?
So how do we actually figure that out? It's just a simple formula, really. We divide the percentage change in quantity supplied by the percentage change in price. And because the supply curve generally slopes upward, meaning higher prices usually encourage producers to supply more, this formula always gives us a positive number. But it's the size of that number that cracks the whole mystery wide open. Let's test drive this tool with a real-world scenario. Imagine you've got two different garment manufacturers in Bangladesh. Let's call them Producer A and Producer B. Both of them currently sell their clothes at $10 each, supplying exactly 100 units a day. Suddenly, a massive celebrity is spotted wearing their clothes on social media. Demand absolutely shoots up overnight, and the market price jumps from $10 to $12. In response, Producer A scrambles and manages to increase their supply to 110 units per day. But Producer B, they ramp up their supply to 140 units.
All right, let's run the numbers real quick. For Producer A, a 10% supply increase divided by a 20% price jump gives us a score of 0.5. Since it's less than 1, their supply is what we call price inelastic. It's rigid. Producer B, on the other hand, pulled off a 40% increase in supply for that exact same 20% price bump. That gives them a score of 2. Because it's greater than 1, their supply is price elastic. They are incredibly agile and highly responsive.
And you can see this brilliantly illustrated on a graph. Notice how that top, inelastic curve is incredibly steep. I mean, a huge jump in price only gets you a tiny little bump in the quantity supplied. But look at the bottom. The elastic supply curve stretches way out, much flatter to the right. It shows a massive, rapid jump in quantity supplied for that exact same, relatively small price increase.
Okay, let's switch gears and see how this plays out in a completely different market, with a Kenyan tea producer. I challenge you to predict how the shape of the supply curve changes as the price shifts here. Look at the numbers. At $90 a sack, they're happily supplying 19 sacks. But watch what happens as the price per sack starts plummeting down that table. By the time it hits $60, they're only supplying 9 sacks. And when the price drops to $50,
Boom! Supply hits an absolute wall. 0 sacks. As soon as the price hits $50, this facility stops supplying tea to the market entirely. They simply cannot justify the cost of production at that price point. And this perfectly demonstrates price responsiveness in the real world. You know, the producer isn't just some machine. They actively evaluate whether the market price actually justifies the sheer effort and cost of harvesting and processing those tea leaves.
Now that we've seen reality, we've got to talk about the extreme outer limits of this concept. On one end, we have PES equals 0, perfectly inelastic supply. This means supply is at a complete, absolute standstill. It cannot change at all, no matter how high the price rockets into the stratosphere. On the exact opposite end, we have PES equals infinity, perfectly elastic supply. This is pure, instant agility. where a producer is willing to supply an infinite amount of a good, but only at one specific fixed price, and literally not a single penny less. To really lock that concept of zero elasticity in your mind, just picture Wembley Stadium. Let's say there's a massive, historic football match happening, right? Ticket demand skyrockets to the moon. People are willing to pay thousands. Well, it doesn't matter. The stadium has a fixed number of seats. Supply cannot change in the short run. You can't just magically conjure up 10,000 new concrete seats overnight just because demand is high. The PSS is zero.
So, what's the crucial takeaway here? It's understanding why some businesses are rigid like a concrete stadium and others are agile like a bustling garment factory. It really comes down to three main levers of elasticity: the availability of stocks or inventories, the time period they have to react, and their overall productive capacity. Let's look at how these levers actually get pulled in the real world.
First up, consider the harsh, ticking clock of agriculture. Farmers cannot easily or quickly change the amount they produce. I mean, if the price of broccoli doubles today, a farmer can't just flip a switch to create more broccoli by tomorrow morning. They are trapped by the unyielding length of a growing season. They totally lack the time period required to respond, making their short-term supply highly inelastic.
Now contrast farming's seasonal reality with manufactured goods. Say a construction equipment company sees a sustained boom in demand. They actually have multiple options. In the short run, they might have inventory just sitting in a warehouse that they can instantly sell. In the long run, they can just buy new heavy machinery, adopt new tech, or hire more workers to rapidly expand their productive capacity. Their supply is highly elastic.
And what's incredibly fascinating is how these differences react to shifts in demand. For manufactured goods, a demand shift is met with an inelastic supply curve, resulting in a fairly mild, totally manageable change in price. But for agriculture, because the supply curve is so incredibly steep and inelastic, that exact same shift in demand triggers violent, dramatic price swings.
Let's take our detective tool out into the real world again to see the actual human cost of these violent price swings. We're traveling to Lasalgan in Maharashtra, India. This is the country's absolute largest onion market, where millions of tons of onions are traded every single year. And for the small farmers here, onion sales are pretty much their only source of income.
Now look at this brutal juxtaposition between two different harvest seasons in the exact same year. In early 2017, the farmers had a bumper harvest. They produced 11% more onions than usual. Great, right? Well, because demand for basic goods is relatively fixed, that slight overproduction crashed wholesale prices by 40%. Then, in November of that same year, they had a poor harvest. Supply dropped and wholesale prices instantly shot up by an astounding 170% in just a few weeks. I want you to really think about that November harvest for a second. Prices spiked by 170%. Was this incredible price surge good news for the farmers? Like, did those skyrocketing prices finally bring wealth to these small agricultural communities after the massive crash earlier in the year? The tragic answer is no. And this completely resolves the mystery we set up at the start of our explainer. You see, these farmers are caught in what we call the inelastic trap. When they produce a high volume, the sudden massive supply pushes the price down so incredibly far that they earn less overall. But during a shortage, when prices shoot up to the moon, they have too few onions to actually sell. They literally can't capitalize on the high prices.
They lose when the harvest is amazing, and they lose when the harvest is terrible. It leaves us with this provocative, heartbreaking reality from our source material. When farmers grow more, they get less. When they grow less, they still get less. Can they do anything to combat this? It's a powerful reminder that concepts like price elasticity of supply aren't just lines on a graph in a textbook. They're the invisible forces shaping the daily livelihoods of millions of people. Definitely something to deeply ponder next time you check the price tag on your groceries.